So this was described in the video. Don't know how much of that you caught. I recommend you go back and take another look at it after I describe it here. So the neuromuscular junction. So muscular, I think we got that down. Neuro, you should be thinking of nervous system. So this is where the nervous system will tell the muscle it's time to contract. So we're going to have to draw two cells here, well, parts of cells. Both of these cells are really long and skinny, so I can't draw the whole thing. This might somewhat, anyway, resemble what you saw in the video. So these are two really big cells, actually. I don't like that one either. Okay, oops. All right, I am just acting up left and right. All right. Here we go. Okay, so this area down here is our muscle fiber. And remember, it is a long, skinny cell. So I've only shown a portion of it. It would go off the screen in both directions a ways. And it is fairly thick in diameter. So this is just a small portion of that muscle fiber. And then up here, this is a neuron. I'm just going to bounce ahead a little bit to Unit 3. This is an axon. It's the long, skinny piece that comes out of a neuron to go stretch out and communicate with something far away. At the end of the axon, it expands to form what we call synaptic bulb, sometimes also knob. Your book uses one of them. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one, but either one of them is fine with me. I tend to use bulb just out of habit. And then down here on the muscle cell, I wanted to point out a couple things. So remember, there's a connective tissue wrapping around every muscle fiber. Every single individual cell has a connective tissue wrapping, which is called endomysium. Actually, I'm going to label it over here so it's a little less busy. So that extra red line there is the connective tissue wrapping. If you can imagine, I know it doesn't look like a wrapping, it's just a line, but we've kind of done this in cross-section. So that surrounds the entire cell except this area here where the neuron and the muscle cell almost but don't quite touch. They are very, very close to each other, but not quite touching. That small area, it really is just like a pinprick along the length of the entire muscle cell. We call that area the motor end plate. Which is, I don't know, maybe motor makes you think of muscle. Motor information is information carried by the nervous system telling you what to move, or actually also a gland. It would tell a gland to secrete. So when you see the word motor, you're actually thinking nervous system, information that's going from the brain out to the muscles to tell them to move. End means, I guess, it's the end of the motor information. And plate, I don't know, I guess they thought that was a plate. So the motor end plate has no endomysium. It is just, well, what is this line? That line is that's the plasma membrane of our muscle fiber, which maybe you remember has a weird name, the sarcolemma. Because muscle cells have weird names for everything. Instead of the plasma membrane, we call it the sarcolemma. So motor end plate is actually a wavy part of the sarcolemma that is directly adjacent to the synaptic bulb of the neuron as the signal makes its way down. We'll talk briefly about it in Unit 3. When it reaches, it's actually an electrical impulse. When it reaches the synaptic bulb responds by releasing these containers called vesicles. I'm just going to draw a few of them inside the synaptic bulb. This is a vesicle. It's a little container. And inside that container, little membrane-bound container, so those circles are membranes. And these dots in here, those are chemicals. Those are molecules that communicate. So inside the vesicle, so this is, actually specifically, because there's lots of different kinds of vesicles and lots of different types of cells, this is a synaptic vesicle. And inside of it, we've got with the chemical we call a neurotransmitter. I'm going to run out of room. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of neurotransmitters. That says neurotransmitters, trust me. And the type of neurotransmitter depends on what area you're in. It could be in the brain. It could be somewhere in, the body, like this is somewhere in the body. There's a lot of different kinds of neurotransmitters. Some may be familiar to you. I'm going to give you some that are perhaps familiar. You do not need them for the exam. I will write them in red. I don't know if that helps you not remember them. Probably crossing them out will. Dopamine is a type of neurotransmitter. Most people have heard of that. Serotonin, also a type of neurotransmitter. We are not worried about either of those for this class, though they are very, very interesting. Instead, the neurotransmitter at the neuromuscular junction specifically, so the junction between a neuron and the skeletal muscle cell, that neurotransmitter is called acetylcholine, which I'm sure you're hating that right now because that is a lot longer than and harder to remember than I think dopamine or serotonin. Fortunately, there's an abbreviation. It's pretty standard. ACH. I will take that on an exam instead of acetylcholine. Yay, much easier. So these little synaptic vesicles are filled with a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. When the neuron fires and sends an electrical impulse down and it reaches the synaptic bulb, the vesicles will then go to the plasma membrane, the edge of the cell of the neuron, and it will dump this acetylcholine into this little space. That space is called, to label that, the space. This space is called the synaptic cleft. It is a very narrow space between the neuron and the muscle fiber, so between these two cells. So this neurotransmitter will float across the synaptic cleft, and it will land on little proteins. These are little plasma membrane or sarcolemma proteins sitting on the membrane of the muscle fiber. And those are receptors. Specifically, they are ACH receptors. So those are little proteins that respond to acetylcholine. So when acetylcholine lands on one of these receptors, it will tell the muscle that it's time to contract. This is one little part, one little wave from that. I'll just redraw a tiny version of it over here. So I drew it like this, the neuron. This is the one tiny wave that I've blown up here because I want to just zoom in and do that one more time. And then this, it actually is even wavier here on the muscle side. So that red line would be the portion of sarcolemma that's next to the neuron. So it would be part of the motor end plate. And again, motor end plate is just like exposed sarcolemma. Okay, so again, within the synaptic bulb, you've got a bunch of vesicles, and inside the vesicles, we've got a bunch of acetylcholine. When the neuron fires, the electrical impulse goes down, and the vesicles will all dump their contents into this space, the synaptic cleft. So, quick reminder, it's too many arrows, sorry. This is the synaptic vesicle. Vesicle, there we go. Synaptic vesicle that contains ACH. And this vesicle then dumps into the space called the synaptic cleft. Synaptic cleft. Then on the muscle side, we have, see, it's very wavy here because of surface area, so you can have as many receptors as possible. So those are acetylcholine receptors, which are proteins sitting on the surface of the plasma membrane, and they will receive the signal. So when the acetylcholine lands there, the receptor will then tell the rest of the muscle cell it's time to contract. And we're going to get into a little bit about how that happens in a bit. But what I would like to talk about first is what goes wrong at the neuromuscular junction. Because when something goes wrong, it actually helps you understand how the entire system functions, all of these various parts. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell you what Botox does. There's a really nice drawing of the neuromuscular junction. Okay, so what you can see here, this is the axon, the very end of the neuron. The rest of the neuron's way up here in the spinal cord, very far away. But we'll learn about that more in Unit 3. And the axon, actually several little branches of the axon can come off of a single one. And then they enlarge a little bit at the end. Those are synaptic bulbs. But if you look at the length of, this is just a portion of the entire muscle cell right here. It's just a tiny pinprick spot on the entire length of the muscle fiber or the muscle cell. So this is not a very big area of the actual muscle cell. And they've zoomed in a little bit more here. This is your synaptic bulb. I'm just going to be lazy and not completely label everything. And you can see, they didn't draw it very well here, but there is endomysium all around the muscle fiber. Actually, that's what this hazy area is supposed to be. But there is no endomysium there, no connective tissue layer in this area. Change color a bit. So this area, the white wavy here, is sarcolemma that doesn't have endomysium, and we call that area of sarcolemma the motor end plate. Okay, and then if we zoom in even more, we've zoomed in maybe to an area about that big right there and blown it up to see a little bit closer. You can see these purple things here. Those are the vesicles, and the little green dots inside, those are the little neurotransmitter molecules, so acetylcholine. So that again is the vesicle. I'm being lazy, sorry, and not putting synaptic, but that's the synaptic vesicle, and inside of it has acetylcholine. And then this area here, this space, and it is a space. I know it doesn't look like one. I wish your book had made that look a little more like a space, but the blue area is the end of the neuron, and this other area down here would be the muscle fiber, and they do not directly touch each other. There is a space called, oh, and I guess I won't be lazy this time, synaptic cleft. And then these purple things here, those are sitting on the sarcolemma. Those are your ACH receptors on the muscle side that when this green dot lands on them, they'll receive the signal and tell the muscle to then contract.